So hi everyone, my name is Nikhil. I'm a second year food technology student at University Institute of Chemical Technology, and in this video I'll be talking about what are the genetically modified foods and their impact on human body. So let's get started. But we will firstly clear some basic concepts like what is meant by gene, then what is meant by genetics, then genetic modification and the genetic modification in the context of food. So firstly, what is meant by genes? Genes are the physical and functional unit of heredity. Genes are the sequences of DNA and are arranged alternatively one after another at specific locations on the chromosomes in the nucleus of a cell. So basically, cell contains nucleus, and in the nucleus the chromosomes are present, and a gene is a segment of DNA which contains instructions for building one or more molecules that help the body to perform their work more efficiently. The second is genetics. The word gen in the genetics means the beginning. Basically, genetics is the science of genes and how the traits are passed from parents to the offsprings, that is from one generation to the another generation. Basically, genetics is the study of genes. Genetics can simply called as a study of genes. The next is genetic modification. So what is genetic modification? When we talk about the genetic modification, so it is not a new concept, okay, because we are doing modifications in all the areas from ancient times. Like the plants and the animal breeders in the early times choose the individual with good traits, and they tend to use selective breeding methods to achieve the result that they wanted. For examples, let's take account of a weak cow which is not having good traits and a bull who is having a healthy body as well as good traits. So basically what breeders do, they mate these two organisms. The one is weak and the another is strong, having healthy traits. So by mating them, they can reproduce a healthy calf which will contain the traits of that bull, good traits of that bull. Or making the simple breeding like Gregor Mendel that he has done with the pea plant. Okay. And as we achieve more and more milestones in the areas of innovation, we are able to develop technologies which can change the genes according to our needs in much more precise and in much more accurate way. Genetic modification involves the modern technologies which helps to develop genetically modified organisms and products. It is a very broad term because there are so many techniques by which we can develop new products or new animals, and each of them is having its advantages as well as its disadvantages. And we can delete or can add specific type of gene functions to achieve desirable characteristics in the animals. So this is idea about genes, like what are the genes, then what is genetics, study of genes called as genetics, and genetic modification. And this genetic modification is used in various all the areas that we have in the science, all in the areas of innovation. There's genetic modification take place, but we are going to see only in context of food. So genetic modification in case of foods. Technologists design the plant using genetically modified organism, that is GMO, to make food more nutritious and taste better, as well as it enhances its flavor. For example, engineers generally modify organisms to improve the product and to produce a commercial advantage. So the word commercial advantage means that we are going to produce that food or that product in bulk quantity. That is, the GMOs can produce more yield than normal, and the GMO is a plant or animal that has been genetically modified through addition of small amount of genetic material from other organisms through molecular techniques. So the other organisms include like viruses, bacteria, animals other than the related species. So we have to, for example, we have to modify a species, so we have to use another species which is not related to A to modify that species. So basically we have to use unrelated species for genetic modification. There are also molecular techniques present which can help us to do molecular or genetic modifications, like recombinant DNA technology, which allows the creation of an organism as desired by humans. For example, in case of, if we think about the food, then there is an example like the meat from genetically modified organism have good taste and they also show better texture and flavor than normal meat. So, as we talk about the increase in population in the previous podcast, GMOs can also help us to produce foods in more and bulk quantities. So, basically, we also look forward towards all these genetically modified foods as an increase in yield, as an increase in food production to demand, because demand is going to be high in future and supply is going to be low. So, we have to supply. So, we have to maintain that demand and supply chain in case of that thing. So there are some genetically modified foods such as bt-brinjal, which is genetically modified food crop, and it is ready for large scale field trials and seed production in India. The second is bt cotton. It is an also better example of modified crops, and many foods are modified, genetically modified, because to increase the resistance with bacteria or microbes, or to become tolerant to the herbicides that we use in the farms. So there are some basic crops or the foods that we modify generally. The first is corn. The genetically modified maize has also caused controversy with respect to the possible health effects, impact of other insects, and impact on other plants via gene flow. Gene flow, also called as allele flow, that is from sequence the gene flow take place in everyone's body. It is also called as Bacillus thuringiensis, that is BT corn. Okay, and it is a GMO corn that produces protein that are toxic to certain insects but not to humans. So basically the concept behind to produce all the genetically modified foods or modified crops is that for example we are having, so as I stated, like they contains a special type of protein which helps to kill the insect and the pests. So basically when we are having a farm of like bt corn, okay, so what bt corn or that specific protein that we have introduced in that corn do, whenever any kind of insect or pest attack that plant or crop, it immediately killed by that protein after feeding on that plant. So basically the increase of population of that insects not take place there, so immediately it get killed. So because we know that insects multiply very fast, so it killed fast, immediately killed by feeding on that crop, so the population cannot increases, so it restricts the growth of that insects and gives us more profitability or more yield than before, than normal crops. The second is soybean. The most GMO soy is used for animals and predominantly poultry and livestock and making soybean oil. It is also used as ingredients like lecithin, emulsifiers and proteins in processed foods. The third is cotton, bt cotton. So GMO cotton was created to be resistant to bollworms, that bollworms attacks the cotton, and GMO cotton not only provides a reliable source of cotton for the textile industry, it is also used to make cotton seed oil, which is used in packaged foods and in many restaurants for frying purposes. And GMO cotton seed meal and hulls are also used in food for animals. So there are multiple benefits of cotton. Like we also use in textile industry, then we also used it as a cotton seed like to produce oil, then also as a food for animals. The fourth type of food or the crop is potato. Some GMO potatoes were developed to resist insect pests and diseases. In addition, some GMO potato varieties have been developed to resist browning, okay, that can occur when potatoes are packaged, stored and transported, or even cut with the knife. While browning does not change the quality of that potato, it often leads to food being unnecessarily thrown away because people mistakenly believe brown food is spoiled food. So it also happens in the context of apple. The fifth food is apple. The few varieties of GMO apples were developed to resist browning, that is reddish color that appears on the surface of the apple after cutting it down and leaving it for a long time. So what happened in that case, the acid which is present in apple reacts with the atmospheric oxygen and a reddish color or the browning appears on the surface of that apple. And when we used all these GMO crops It helps to cut down the food waste, because as many consumers think brown apples are spoiled. So basically they think that the brown apple or the reddish apple is spoiled apple. So the wastage takes place at very large level because of that food, because of that condition. So we see like these are some basic genetically modified foods that we basically, there is research going all about different kinds of food, different kinds of crops, and engineers generally design plants using genetically modified organisms to be tougher and more nutritious or to taste better. However, people have concerns over their safety, and there is much debate about the pros and cons of the using genetically modified organisms in the foods. Scientists have created GMO foods by introducing genetic material or DNA from a different organisms through genetic engineering. There are some impacts of these genetic foods if you consume them more oftenly. Like the first is you can have allergic reactions, because there is a small risk of GMO food that can trigger an allergic reaction in your body. But this will only happen if the genetic change triggers the production of an allergen in your body, because of which you can be prone to many kinds of allergies. The next is about the cancer. There have been concerns that eating GMO food can introduce carcinogens in your body, which can cause development of cancer in long run. The third is anti-bacterial resistance. Some GMOs contain changes that make them resistant to certain antibiotics. In theory, the genes from these plants could enter humans or animals when they eat them. As a result, the person or animal could also develop antibiotic resistance. So because of which we cannot cure some kind of diseases, like we take antibiotics in case of common cold, common flu, to treat broad spectrum antibiotics, narrow spectrum antibiotics. So the effect of antibiotics cannot seen in our body because of these genetically modified foods. The next is changes can seen in human DNA. Because in 2009, the food scientists noted that the food DNA can survive as far as the gut, and there have been concerns that this could affect the immune system. Some people have also raised fear that eating GMO food could lead to genetic changes in humans. However, most of the DNA in the food, whether GMO or not, is destroyed by cooking or breaks down before it reaches the large intestine. So basically, the normal foods also contains DNA, and genetically modified food also contains DNA. So basically, there are some thinking, like every thinking has an opposite thinking. So in this case, the scientists think that the DNA which present in GMOs can easily break down until the food reaches down the intestine. So these are some impacts of genetically modified foods on the human health. But there are also some pros and cons in case of all conditions about the genetically modified foods. The pros are like it increases the attractiveness to the customers of the food. For example, apples. If you talk about apples, the cut apples that is GMO apples, when cut down, they will not going to be brown, so it will look attractive to the customer. It also enhances the flavor. It increases the shelf life of that food, and it increases the tolerance of that crop to the herbicides, making it easier for farmers to control the weeds. Okay, it increases the nutritional values of that food and greater resistance to insects, and allowing farmers to reduce the wastage of that food. There is also some cons of genetically modified foods, because genetically engineering food is a relatively new concept. Genetically engineering foods, the modification is older concept, but genetically engineering foods or genetically engineered foods is a new practice, which means long-term effects on safety are not yet clear. So many concerns about the disadvantages related to human health. Scientists have not shown that GMO foods are harmful to health, but research is ongoing. And the GMO word, basically genetically modified organisms, are used almost in different areas other than the food. Now some of you will think that GMOs are only used in case of modification of foods, but let me tell you one thing, it's not only up to food, it is far beyond that. The techniques that used to create GMOs are more important in creating some medicines, In fact, genetic engineering, which is the process used to create GMOs, we first used to make human insulin, a medicine that is used to treat the diabetes. Medicines developed through genetic engineering go through an in-depth approval processes, and all the medicines must be proven to be safe and effective before they are approved for human trials or human use. And GMOs are also used in the textile industry, because some GMO cotton plants are used to create cotton that is then used to make fabric for clothing and other materials such as stain resistant fabric, okay, like that, different kinds of things. Just have this knowledge about the genetically modified foods. What are the genetically modified foods, their impact on human health, the pros and cons of the genetically modified food. So that's it for today's podcast, guys. If this podcast has added any good values to life, and if you learn something new today, then please share it with your loved ones you care the most, or if you think that they should increase their knowledge. And if you are new here, then please consider to subscribe the channel for getting such amazing kind of info. Until next time, stay tuned, stay safe, stay healthy. See you soon in the next one. Bye bye.